Chapter 6, Part 1 of Bel Ami, or the History of a Scoundrel. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Bel Ami, or the History of a Scoundrel, by Guy de Maupassant. Translator unknown. Chapter 6. A Step Upward. Part 1. The next morning, Georges Duroy arose, dressed himself, and determined to have money. He sought Forestier. His friend received him in his study. "What made you rise so early?" he asked. "A very serious matter. I have a debt of honor." "A gaming debt?" He hesitated, then repeated, "A gaming debt." "Is it large?" 500 francs. He only needed 280. Forestier asked skeptically, "To whom do you owe that amount?" Duroy did not reply at once. To a Monsieur de Carleville." "Ah, where does he live?" Rue. Forestier laughed. "I know the gentleman. If you want 20 francs, you can have them, but no more." Duroy took the gold piece, called upon more friends, and by 5 o'clock had collected 80 francs. As he required 200 more, he kept what he had begged and muttered, "I shall not worry about it. I will pay it when I can." For 2 weeks he lived economically, but at the end of that time the good resolutions he had formed vanished, and one evening he returned to the Folies Bergere in search of Rachel. But the woman was implacable and heaped coarse insults upon him, until he felt his cheeks tingle and he left the hall. Forestier, out of health and feeble, made Duroy's existence at the office insupportable. The latter did not reply to his rude remarks, but determined to be avenged. He called upon Madame Forestier. He found her reclining upon a couch, reading. She held out her hand without rising, and said, "Good morning, Bel Ami." "Why do you call me by that name?" She replied with a smile. "I saw Mme. de Marelle last week, and I know what they have christened you at her house." He took a seat near his hostess and glanced at her curiously. She was a charming blonde, fair and plump, made for caresses, and he thought, "She is certainly nicer than the other one." He did not doubt that he would only have to extend his hand in order to gather the fruit. As he gazed upon her, she chided him for his neglect of her. He replied, "I did not come because it was for the best." "How? Why?" "Why? Can you not guess?" "No." "Because I loved you a little, only a little, and I did not wish to love you any more." She did not seem surprised nor flattered. She smiled indifferently and replied calmly, "Oh, you can come just the same. No one loves me long." "Why not?" "Because it is useless, and I tell them so at once. If you had confessed your fears to me sooner, I would have reassured you. My dear friend, a man in love is not only foolish but dangerous. I cease all intercourse with people who love me, or pretend to. Firstly, because they bore me, and secondly, because I look upon them with dread, as I would upon a mad dog. I know that your love is only a kind of appetite, while with me it would be a communion of souls. Now, look me in the face." She no longer smiled. "I will never be your sweetheart. It is therefore useless for you to persist in your efforts. And now that I have explained, shall we be friends?" He knew that that sentence was irrevocable, and delighted to be able to form such an alliance as she proposed, he extended both hands, saying: "I am yours, madame, to do with as you will." He kissed her hands, and raising his head, said: "If I had found a woman like you, how gladly would I have married her." She was touched by those words, and in a soft voice, placing her hand upon his arm, she said: "I am going to begin my offices at once. You are not diplomatic." She hesitated. "May I speak freely?" "Yes." "Call upon Mme. Walter, who has taken a fancy to you. But be guarded as to your compliments, for she is virtuous. You will make a better impression there by being careful in your remarks. I know that your position at the office is unsatisfactory, but do not worry, all their employees are treated alike." He said: "Thanks, you are an angel, a guardian angel." As he took his leave, he asked again: "Are we friends? Is it settled?" "It is." Having observed the effect of his last compliment, he said: "If you ever become a widow, I have put in my application." Then he left the room hastily, in order not to allow her time to be angry. Duroy did not like to call on Mme. Walter, for he had never been invited, and he did not wish to commit a breach of etiquette. The manager had been kind to him, appreciated his services, employed him to do difficult work. Why should he not profit by that show of favor to call at his house? One day, therefore, he repaired to the market and bought 25 pears. Having carefully arranged them in a basket to make them appear as if they came from a distance, he took them to Mme. Walter's door with his card, on which was inscribed: "Georges Duroy begs Mme. Walter to accept the fruit which he received this morning from Normandy." The following day he found in his letter box at the office an envelope containing Mme. Walter's card, on which was written: "Mme. Walter thanks M. Georges Duroy very much, and is at home on Saturdays." The next Saturday he called. M. Walter lived on Boulevard Malesherbes, in a double house which he owned. The reception rooms were on the first floor. In the antechamber were 2 footmen. One took Duroy's overcoat, the other his cane, put it aside, opened a door, and announced the visitor's name. In the large mirror in the apartment, Duroy could see the reflection of people seated in another room. He passed through 2 drawing rooms and entered a small boudoir, in which 4 ladies were gathered around a tea table. Notwithstanding the assurance he had gained during his life in Paris, and especially since he had been thrown into contact with so many noted personages, Duroy felt abashed. He stammered: "Madame, I took the liberty." The mistress of the house extended her hand and said to him: "You are very kind, Monsieur Duroy, to come to see me." She pointed to a chair. The ladies chatted on. Visitors came and went. Mme. Walter noticed that Duroy said nothing, that no one addressed him, that he seemed disconcerted, and she drew him into the conversation which dealt with the admission of a certain Monsieur Linet to the Academy. When Duroy had taken his leave, one of the ladies said: "How odd he is! Who is he?" Mme. Walter replied: "One of our reporters. He only occupies a minor position, but I think he will advance rapidly." In the meantime, while he was being discussed, Duroy walked gaily down Boulevard Malesherbes. The following week he was appointed editor of the Echoes, and invited to dine at Mme. Walter's. The Echoes were, M. Walter said, the very pith of the paper. Everything and everybody should be remembered, all countries, all professions, Paris and the provinces, the army, the arts, the clergy, the schools, the rulers and the courtiers. The man at the head of the department should be wide awake, always on his guard, quick to judge of what was best to be said and best to be omitted, to divine what would please the public and to present it well. Duroy was just the man for the place. He was enjoying the fact of his promotion when he received an engraved card which read: "Monsieur and Madame Walter request the pleasure of Monsieur Georges Duroy's company at dinner on Thursday, January the 20th." He was so delighted that he kissed the invitation as if it had been a love letter. Then he sought the cashier to settle the important question of his salary. At first 1,200 francs were allowed Duroy, who intended to save a large share of the money. He was busy 2 days getting settled in his new position in a large room, one end of which he occupied, and the other end of which was allotted to Boisrenard, who worked with him. The day of the dinner party he left the office in good season, in order to have time to dress, and was walking along Rue de Londres when he saw before him a form which resembled Mme. de Marelle's. He felt his cheeks glow and his heart throb. He crossed the street in order to see the lady's face. He was mistaken, and breathed more freely. He had often wondered what he should do if he met Clotilde face to face. Should he bow to her or pretend not to see her? "I should not see her," thought he. When Duroy entered his rooms, he thought: "I must change my apartments. These will not do any longer." He felt both nervous and gay, and said aloud to himself: "I must write to my father." Occasionally he wrote home, and his letters always delighted his old parents. As he tied his cravat at the mirror, he repeated: "I must write home to morrow. If my father could see me this evening in the house to which I am going, he would be surprised. Sacristi, I shall soon give a dinner which has never been equaled." Then he recalled his old home, the faces of his father and mother. He saw them seated at their homely board, eating their soup. He remembered every wrinkle on their old faces, every movement of their hands and heads. He even knew what they said to each other every evening as they supped. He thought, "I will go to see them some day." His toilette completed, he extinguished his light and descended the stairs. Chapter 6. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.